Lieutenant James Miller stood at the airlock, straightening his dress uniform one final time. His heart hammered against his ribs as the decontamination cycle completed with a soft hiss. This was it, humanity's first official diplomatic mission to Teralis. "Remember your training," Commander Davis said beside him. "Just follow protocol and everything will be fine." James nodded, though his mouth had gone dry. 6 months of intensive preparation had led to this moment. He had memorized Terralian customs, studied their complex social hierarchies, and practiced their formal greetings until he could perform them in his sleep. Still, nothing could fully prepare a human for face-to-face contact with the insectoid species that ruled this sector of space. The airlock doors slid open, revealing a vast, domed chamber. The air was thicker than Earth standard, carrying strange spice-like scents that his training hadn't mentioned. A delegation of Terralians waited in formation, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the chamber's soft purple lighting. "Steady," whispered Davis. "Remember, no sudden movements." James stepped forward, leading the 5-person human delegation. His eyes were immediately drawn to the central figure, taller than the others by nearly a full meter, with an ornate carapace adorned with what appeared to be precious metals and stones. Queen Lyra of the unified Terralian hives, ruler of 87 billion subjects across 12 worlds. Following protocol, James stopped precisely 10 paces from the Queen and performed the formal greeting gesture. Right arm extended with palm up, head bowed at exactly 15 degrees. The gesture was meant to show respect while demonstrating that humans understood Terralian customs. "Your Majesty," he said in carefully practiced Terralian, the words clicking strangely through his human vocal cords. "I bring greetings from Earth and the United Planets. We are honored by your welcome." The chamber fell silent. James held the pose, counting seconds in his head. The briefing had said to hold the position until acknowledged. Then something unexpected happened. Queen Lyra moved forward with surprising speed for her size. Before James could react, she had wrapped her 4 upper limbs around his body in what could only be described as an embrace. Her exoskeleton was warm, not cold as he had expected, and smelled faintly of cinnamon. The embrace lasted only 5 seconds, but when the Queen stepped back, the other Terralians had dropped to a kneeling position. The only sound was a low, harmonic humming that seemed to come from the Queen herself. "The human is claimed," announced a Terralian to the Queen's right. "The alliance is blessed." James remained frozen, unsure what had just happened. His training had covered many scenarios, but not this. He glanced back at Commander Davis, whose face had gone pale. "Your Majesty," James began, unsure how to proceed. "You are welcome among us, James Miller of Earth," Queen Lyra said, her voice translator rendering her clicks and whistles into smooth English. "You have been honored above all visitors to our realm." Behind him, James heard Davis whisper urgently into her communicator. "Get me Xenocultural relations immediately. Something's happened." The Terralian court began to move in what appeared to be a celebratory pattern, forming complex geometric shapes around James and the Queen. Several approached with containers of shimmering liquid, offering them first to the Queen and then, to James's surprise, to him. "Drink," said Queen Lyra. "It seals the claiming." James hesitated, then remembered his diplomatic training. When in doubt, follow the host's lead unless there's clear danger. He accepted the drink and sipped cautiously. It tasted like honey and starlight. As the Terralians continued their celebration around him, one thought kept repeating in James's mind. What does it mean to be claimed by an alien queen? He would soon find out. James sat in the private chamber the Terralians had provided, staring at the strange geometric patterns that decorated the walls. The celebration had lasted hours before the Queen finally dismissed the court, allowing the human delegation to retreat and regroup. "This is unprecedented." Commander Davis paced the room, her boots clicking against the polished stone floor, "and potentially disastrous." Dr. Tom Ward, the team's xenoanthropologist, couldn't hide his excitement despite the tense situation. Actually, this is fascinating. The claiming ritual hasn't been documented before. It's only mentioned in ancient Turalian texts. What exactly does claimed mean? James asked, the honey-like drink from earlier still tingling on his tongue. Ward activated his tablet and scrolled through his notes. According to our limited information, the royal claiming embrace is an ancient practice. It basically marks you as, he hesitated, the Queen's chosen consort. The room fell silent. You're saying I'm married to the Queen? James finally managed. Not exactly married in the human sense, Ward clarified. More like designated as her official companion. It appears to be both political and personal. Commander Davis stopped pacing. This complicates everything. We can't risk offending them by rejecting their customs, but we also can't have a human lieutenant suddenly becoming royal consort to an alien queen. The communication panel by the door chimed softly. A Turalian voice announced, "The royal advisor requests entry." Davis nodded to James. "This is your show now, apparently." The door slid open, revealing a smaller Turalian with blue-tinted carapace markings. He entered with a graceful movement that reminded James of dancing. "I am Kel, first advisor to Queen Lyra." The Turalian introduced himself. "I have come to prepare Lieutenant Miller for tomorrow's claiming ceremony." James felt his stomach drop. "There's another ceremony?" "Of course." Kel tilted his head, a gesture James recognized as confusion. Today was merely the initial claiming. Tomorrow, all 12 Hive representatives will witness the formal bonding. Davis stepped forward. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Lieutenant Miller is a diplomatic representative. He wasn't prepared for this development." Kel's antennae twitched rapidly, a sign of alarm, according to James's training. "Are you suggesting the lieutenant would reject the Queen's claim? Such an action has no precedent. It would be seen as the gravest insult imaginable." "How grave, exactly?" James asked carefully. "The last time a royal was publicly rejected was 400 cycles ago," Kel replied. "It resulted in what you humans might call a civil war. 3 hives were completely destroyed." The humans exchanged worried glances. "Is there an alternative?" James asked. "A way to honor the Queen without a full bonding." Kel's body stilled completely, a Tyrellian expression of deep thought. "The claiming is already done. The news has spread to all 12 hives. Preparations are underway. To stop now would suggest the Queen made an error in judgment. And that would weaken her position," James realized aloud. "Precisely," Kel confirmed. James took a deep breath. 6 months of training had hammered one principle above all others. The mission comes first. This first contact was too important to risk over cultural awkwardness. "Then I'll participate in the ceremony," James decided. "But I need to understand exactly what's expected of me." Davis looked like she wanted to object but remained silent. Kel's antennae relaxed. "Wise choice, Lieutenant. The Queen saw your potential correctly." He produced a small crystal device. "This contains the ceremony protocols and your new duties as royal claimed." As Kel began explaining Turalian royal customs, James wondered what he had gotten himself into. Somewhere between diplomatic incident and interstellar crisis, he had become something unprecedented, a human of importance in an alien court. And tomorrow, it would become official. The formal claiming ceremony had concluded 3 days ago, and James was still adjusting to his new reality. He stood on the balcony of his royal chambers, gazing out at the sprawling hive city that stretched to the horizon. Towering spires connected by delicate bridges created a landscape unlike anything on Earth. "The northern gardens are particularly beautiful at this time of year," said Queen Lyra, joining him on the balcony. Despite her imposing height and alien features, James had begun to read her expressions. The slight tilt of her head indicated curiosity. "I'm still getting used to the layout," James admitted. "Human cities are more chaotic." "Chaos has its own patterns," Lyra observed. That is something my advisors fail to understand about your species. James turned to face her. In private, the Queen wore fewer ceremonial adornments, making her seem almost casual despite her regal bearing. Speaking of your advisors, James said carefully, they don't all seem pleased with my presence. Lyra's antennae twitched in amusement. You notice more than they expect. This is why humans are valuable. A Turalian servant approached with a tray of food, strange fruits, and what appeared to be honey-glazed insects. James had learned to eat the fruits while politely declining the insect delicacies, a compromise the Turalians accepted with good humor. I've been meaning to ask, James said, selecting a purple fruit that tasted surprisingly like pears. Why did you choose to claim me? It's caused quite a stir. Lyra was silent for a moment, her compound eyes reflecting the city lights. Walk with me, James Miller. She led him through a series of corridors until they reached a secured chamber James hadn't visited before. Inside was a holographic display showing what appeared to be a military confrontation. 3 cycles ago, a human trading vessel was attacked by the Orcs pirates near our outer territories. Lyra explained. It was a small vessel with only 6 humans aboard. The display showed a tiny human ship surrounded by 3 larger vessels. We expected a tragedy, Lyra continued. But then, something remarkable happened. The hologram showed the human ship executing maneuvers that seemed impossible, evading attacks and somehow disabling 2 pirate vessels before escaping. 6 humans, Lyra said, outsmarted and outfought 18 Vorax warriors. My military advisors could not explain it. James nodded. Humans are good at improvising under pressure. More than good, Lyra corrected. Your adaptability is unmatched among known species. Where Turalians plan for generations, humans can change strategies in moments. She deactivated the display. I claimed you because humanity is becoming a power in this sector. Some of my advisors fear you, others wish to fight you. I choose to ally with you instead. Through me, James realized. Yes, the claiming is more than symbolic. It gives you authority in Turalian society that no other alien has ever held. James considered this new information. What he had thought was merely a cultural misunderstanding was actually a calculated political move. There's something else, Lyra added, her voice dropping to a lower register. Something few outside my inner circle know. She activated another hologram, showing star charts with ominous red markings spreading across several sectors. The Krex dominion is expanding again. Their hive minds make even our unified colony seem divided. We need humanity's unpredictability. James studied the charts, understanding dawning. You're preparing for war. I am preparing to prevent one, Lyra corrected. And humans, with their strange ideas and flexible thinking, may be the key. As they left the chamber, James felt the weight of his unexpected position. He wasn't just a diplomatic curiosity or a cultural misunderstanding. He was a strategic alliance personified. Tomorrow, Lyra said, you will join the Royal Council meeting. Some will test you. Show them why humans are respected and sometimes feared. James nodded. It seemed he had more to offer than he realized. James sat quietly at the edge of the Royal Council chamber, observing the heated debate among the Turalian leaders. After 2 weeks as the Queen's claimed companion, he had learned when to speak and when to listen. Right now, listening told him far more than talking ever could. The human alliance weakens us, declared Nexer, representative of the mountain hive. His carapace gleamed with red and gold markings of a traditionalist faction. For 12 generations, we have stood alone and prospered. Queen Lyra remained still on her raised platform. And for 12 generations, the Krex have grown stronger while we remained isolated. The council chamber was designed like an amphitheater, with 12 representatives seated in a half-circle before the Queen. James noticed how 3 representatives, Nexer, Vela, and Tark, exchanged subtle antenna twitches whenever certain topics arose. Perhaps the Krex threat is exaggerated, suggested Vela smoothly. Our border defenses are strong. James watched as Tark's aide quietly passed something to Nexer's second-in-command. No one else seemed to notice the exchange. While the debate continued, James activated his translator's recording function and casually moved toward a refreshment table near Tark's delegation. As he poured a drink, he overheard a whispered conversation. "The Queen must not see the updated border reports," one aide said to another. "Nexer has handled it." James returned to his seat, mind racing. Something wasn't right. When the council took a brief recess, he approached Lyra's most trusted advisor, Kel. "I need to see the latest border reports," James said quietly. "The actual ones, not what was presented to the council." Kel's antennae flattened against his head. "That is not possible. Those reports come directly from—" He stopped suddenly, realization dawning. "You suspect interference." "I'm not sure," James admitted. "But on Earth, we have a saying, trust, but verify." Later that evening, James met with Queen Lyra in her private gardens, away from potential eavesdroppers. Kel joined them, his normally calm demeanor visibly disturbed. "You were right," Kel said, handing James a data crystal. "The border reports were altered before reaching the Queen. The Kreks have already breached our outer sensor network in 3 locations." Lyra's compound eyes fixed on James. "How did you know?" "I didn't," James admitted. "But I noticed Nexer, Vela, and Tark coordinating their responses too perfectly, and they seemed very interested in preventing any increased military readiness." "This is troubling," Lyra said, her voice low. "But not proof of conspiracy." "There's more," James added. "I accessed the communication logs from my quarters. There have been encrypted transmissions from all 3 hives to an unknown location beyond your borders." Kel's body went rigid with shock. "Treason." "Maybe," James cautioned. "Or manipulation. The Kreks are telepathic, correct? Could they be influencing council members?" Lyra considered this possibility. "It would explain much. But how can we be certain?" James thought for a moment. "On Earth, we sometimes use misinformation to expose conspirators. We let them think they're succeeding, watch who celebrates, and then catch them in the act. A dangerous game," Kel warned. "More dangerous than being unprepared when the Kreks arrive," James countered. Lyra studied him with what he had come to recognize as admiration. "This is why I claimed you, James Miller. You see patterns we miss and suggest actions we would not consider." She turned to Kel. "Prepare a false announcement about reducing our border patrols. Let us see who welcomes this news." As they finalized their plan, James realized how deeply he had become involved in Turalian politics. What began as a diplomatic misunderstanding had evolved into something much more significant. The Queen hadn't just claimed him for political symbolism. She genuinely valued the human perspective he brought. And now, that perspective might save her throne, and possibly her entire civilization. The Royal Assembly Hall buzzed with tension. James stood beside Queen Lyra's throne, dressed in the ceremonial attire of a royal claimed, a blend of Turalian design modified for human physiology. The false announcement about reducing border patrols had been released 3 days ago, and today's emergency council meeting would spring the trap. "All representatives are present, Your Majesty," announced Kel from the chamber entrance. Lyra rose, her impressive height casting a shadow across the floor. "The council is now in session." James scanned the 12 representatives, focusing on Nexer, Vela, and Tark. Their postures seemed relaxed, too relaxed for an emergency meeting. "I have called you here because of disturbing news," Lyra began. "Our outer colony on Velos Prime has gone silent." A wave of clicking sounds, the Turalian equivalent of gasps, filled the chamber. "How is this possible?" demanded a loyal representative. "Our reduced patrols should not have affected Velos Prime's defenses." That announcement was false, Lyra revealed. A test of loyalty. Nexer's antennae twitched violently. "You deceived the council." "With good reason." James stepped forward, drawing all eyes to him. "While the announcement was private, Someone transmitted it beyond our borders within minutes. Screens around the chamber activated, showing communication logs. James had worked through the night with Terralian security experts to trace the encrypted messages. 3 representatives have been communicating with Krex operatives, James continued, planning to disable Terralian defenses from within. Vela stood suddenly. These are human lies. He manipulates our queen. The chamber doors slammed shut. Royal guards moved to block all exits. What happened next shocked even James. Tark's carapace split open, revealing not a Terralian, but a creature with pale, translucent skin. A Krex infiltrator in disguise. Seize them, Lyra commanded. Chaos erupted as guards rushed forward. The disguised Krex produced a weapon and fired at the queen. James reacted instantly, pushing Lyra aside as the energy beam scorched the throne. Lockdown protocol, James shouted to Kell across the room. This wasn't part of their plan, but in the 3 weeks since his claiming, James had studied Terralian security protocols extensively. Kell understood immediately, activating emergency measures that James had suggested just in case. Metal barriers dropped from the ceiling, separating the conspirators from each other. The chamber's atmospheric composition changed subtly, harmless to Terralians, but disorienting to Krex physiology. The infiltrator stumbled, its movements becoming sluggish as the modified air took effect. Nexer, revealed as another disguised Krex, lunged for a control panel but found it unresponsive. I changed the access codes this morning, James explained, stepping forward confidently. Another human precaution. Guards quickly overwhelmed the conspirators. The real Tark and 1 other representative were found bound in hidden chambers, replaced by infiltrators days ago. As the situation came under control, Lyra approached James. Your human paranoia, as you called it, saved us today. James smiled slightly. On Earth, we prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. A wise approach, Lyra acknowledged. But there is something I don't understand. How did you know to adjust the atmospheric controls? I didn't know for certain, James admitted. But I've been studying Krex biology. Their infiltration technology can mimic appearances, but not their physiology. I suspected that might be a vulnerability. The remaining loyal council members gathered around, looking at James with new respect. This is why the claiming was necessary, Lyra addressed them. Human thinking, unpredictable, adaptable, innovative, complements our structured approach. Together, we are stronger. As the guards led away the captured infiltrators, James realized something important. The claiming that had once seemed like a diplomatic complication had become something more meaningful, a genuine partnership between 2 very different species, each with strengths the other lacked. And against the coming Krex invasion, they would need every advantage they could find. A week had passed since the dramatic exposure of the Krex infiltrators. The Terralian capital hummed with activity as defense preparations accelerated across all 12 hives. James stood on the observation deck of the Royal Tower, watching as transport ships loaded with troops and supplies departed for the border colonies. Your plan worked better than expected, said Queen Lyra, joining him at the viewport. The captured infiltrators have provided valuable intelligence. James nodded. Sometimes the best way to understand your enemy is to let them think they're winning. In the days following the council confrontation, Terralian intelligence had uncovered the full extent of the Krex infiltration. 5 more disguised agents had been discovered in various positions throughout the hive hierarchy. Each capture revealed more of the Krex invasion plans. The other representatives have requested your presence at tomorrow's strategy session, Lyra said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. It seems they no longer view you as merely a diplomatic curiosity. Progress, James smiled. Though I suspect some still don't fully trust me. Trust is earned over time, Lyra replied. And you have earned much in a short period. They walked together through the tower gardens, a carefully cultivated space where plants from various worlds grew together. James had come to appreciate these quiet moments with the Queen, away from the formality of court life. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," James said as they paused beside a fountain of luminescent water. "Why me specifically? There were other humans in our delegation with higher rank." Lyra's compound eyes seemed to soften, a subtle shift James had learned to recognize as thoughtfulness. "When your delegation first arrived, I observed all of you carefully," she explained. "The others were competent, but rigid in their thinking. You watched everything, adapted to each new situation, showed curiosity rather than judgment." She gestured to the garden around them. "Like these plants from different worlds growing together, you seemed capable of thriving in unfamiliar soil." So the claiming wasn't just about political alliance, James realized. It was about survival. Lyra confirmed. "The Krex threat has concerned me for years, but my advisors were divided on how to respond. Traditional approaches would not be enough. We needed a different perspective. And that's what humans provide." "What you provide, James Miller," Lyra corrected. "Your particular way of thinking." A Turalian messenger approached, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, First Advisor Kell requests your presence in the communication chamber. We've received a response from the Earth delegation." After the conspiracy was revealed, James had suggested reaching out to Earth for additional support against the Krex. The initial message had been met with shock, both at the news of James' claiming and the discovered Krex threat. "Let us see what your people have decided," Lyra said. In the communication chamber, Commander Davis's face appeared on the large screen. Her expression was professional, but James could see the relief in her eyes at seeing him well. "Lieutenant Miller," she greeted formally. "You look different." James touched the Turalian symbols now adorning his uniform. "A lot has changed, Commander." "So we've heard," Davis replied. "Earth Command has reviewed your reports and Queen Lyra's request for alliance. I'm pleased to inform you that a joint human-Turalian defense initiative has been approved." Lyra stepped forward. "This alliance will benefit both our peoples, Commander." "We believe so as well, Your Majesty," Davis agreed. "Lieutenant Miller's unique position has opened doors that might have taken years of traditional diplomacy." As they discussed the details of the coming alliance, James felt a sense of accomplishment. What had begun as a cultural misunderstanding had evolved into something historic, the foundation of a partnership between two vastly different species facing a common threat. And somehow, he had found his place right at the center of it all. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Royal Hive was filled to capacity. Representatives from all 12 Turalian hives stood alongside a delegation of 20 humans in formal dress. James stood at the center of the platform, Queen Lyra to his right, and Admiral Wilson of the Earth Fleet to his left. "Today marks a historic moment," Lyra's voice carried throughout the chamber. "For the first time in Turalian history, we form a true alliance with another species." 3 months had passed since the exposure of the Krex infiltrators. In that time, the relationship between humans and Turalians had transformed dramatically. What began with one human being claimed by an alien queen had evolved into a full military and cultural exchange. "The Krex believed they could divide us," Lyra continued. "Instead, they have united us." James looked out at the gathered audience. Among the Turalians stood human scientists, military advisors, and diplomats, already working with their insectoid counterparts. The initial awkwardness had given way to genuine cooperation. Admiral Wilson stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I formally accept this alliance. Together, we have already pushed back 3 Krex incursions at the border. Together, we will ensure they never threaten either of our peoples again." The assembly erupted in applause, humans clapping their hands, Turalians clicking their mandibles in their traditional show of approval. As the formal ceremony concluded, James found himself surrounded by both humans and Turalians offering congratulations. Commander Davis, who had initially been horrified by his claiming, now smiled as she approached. "Not bad for a lieutenant who just wanted a simple diplomatic mission," she said. though I still can't get used to seeing you in those royal colors." James laughed. "Trust me, I never expected to end up as the royal claimed either." Lieutenant Miller, a deep voice interrupted. Admiral Wilson had joined them. Or should I say, Ambassador Miller now. "The promotion came through?" James asked, surprised. "This morning," Wilson confirmed. "You're officially the first human ambassador to Teralis. Earth Command decided your unique position made you the obvious choice." Later that evening, as the celebrations continued in the city below, James and Lyra stood on the private balcony of the royal quarters. "Ambassador Miller," Lyra said, testing the new title. "It suits you." "It's certainly better than the claimed human," James replied with a smile. "Though I've grown rather fond of that title too." Lyra's antennae twitched in amusement. "You've come to understand our ways better than any outsider ever has. And you've helped humans understand Terralians," James pointed out. "Most of my people thought your species was cold and calculating. Now they see the depth and loyalty beneath." Below them, human engineers worked alongside Terralian builders, constructing a new joint command center. The architectural style was neither fully human nor Terralian, but something new, a physical representation of their alliance. "The Kreks will attack again," Lyra said, her tone growing serious. "Their infiltration was only the first wave." "And we'll be ready," James assured her. "Human adaptability combined with Terralian precision makes a formidable defense." Lyra turned to face him fully. "When I claimed you, many thought it was a mistake. Some feared it was a sign of weakness. None expected it would save us all." "Sometimes the best decisions don't make sense at first," James replied. "That's something both our species can learn." As the twin moons of Teralis rose in the night sky, casting their silver light across the hive city, James reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. A diplomatic mission, an unexpected hug, a cultural misunderstanding, all leading to a historic alliance between two worlds. "To the future," James said, raising a glass of Terralian honey wine. "To understanding," Lyra replied, touching her glass to his. "And to the clinging that changed everything." In the vastness of space, as news of the human-Terralian alliance spread from world to world, the story began to take on mythic proportions. How an alien queen hugged a human diplomat and claimed him as hers, and how that single act had changed the course of galactic history.